How's it going, everyone, and welcome back to the Big Swing No Ding podcast, sending those bales back to New South Wales since 2019. Yeah, I know, we're back. There's not really that much cricket going on right now, but I've decided now's the time I'm going to talk about the Australian Test team, even though we've got like a 3-month gap between our next test. I don't care. I'm talking about whatever I want because this is a sporadically posting podcast and I'm going to talk about it anyway, alright? As you see by the title, we're going to be talking about Australian Test openers today, and quite frankly, it's because I find it really bloody interesting, right? Because we opened with Warner and Khawaja for the last couple of years. Warner being highly discussed. It was the last episode we made was, should Warner be dropped? And in that episode, I said yes, but only at the end of the Australian summer because I was still backing him in Australian conditions. What do you know? He made 200 at the MCG test, which was the next test straight after we made that episode. Failed in India, although he only played like 2.5 matches to be completely fair to him. But he wasn't good in India. We all knew he wasn't going to be good in India, and now we've got England coming up in the next test series as well as World Test Championship final, and that is where he's been even more famous. He has even more famously struggled. So, like, at least in India, you've still got cling on to a little bit of hope because he's got a really good history in the IPL. He's fallen off recently, but, well, maybe not completely fallen off, but, you know what I mean, though. And you could see that he can sometimes play spin, but Test cricket has just never worked. And it's led to a lot of Aussies questioning his place, but that 200 did come at a really good time. But he ended up getting injured partway through that Border Gavaskar Trophy series. And Travis Head, he took the reins. He opened the batting. You all called me crazy for saying that Travis Head might do it. And a quick shout out to my buddy Adnan for coming up with that idea last year. And I tweeted about it. I've got the receipts on him. And hey, it worked. Trav Head looked really good against spin, which is something I never thought I would ever say. He started against spin in all his innings pretty much. Well, actually, no, a couple innings he didn't when he was opening, which was the whole idea of it. But, you know, the way the conditions were, he ended up facing spin straight up anyway. But, I don't know, just it seemed like a really good mental shift from Travis Head in that series. But if we're looking ahead to the World Test Championship final and the Ashes, obviously Travis Head's going to be in the team because pace is his strong point and he's clearly in impeccable form right now. What's he, like the number 4 or number 5 batsman in the world, which is crazy to think about. But he's going to go back to number 5 for the Ashes, you would think, right? So you've got Khawaja's a lock for number 1. He was our best player, I would say. Well, maybe Nathan Lyon was our best player throughout the BGT. I don't feel really that great about saying BGT. Maybe I won't say that. Throughout the India series, how about that? Khawaja was probably our best player, definitely our best batsman. Hanscom was probably our second best batsman, even though he averaged 29, which is crazy. Like, that just shows how rough it was for batsmen in India in that series. I can't even think about who else was good. Head was pretty good, honestly. He was pretty good. Marnus, I know his averages got inflated because of his last innings and whatnot, but he made 30 or 25-ish pretty much every innings, which is more than what can be said for a lot of them, right? Alex Carey was absolutely woeful. David Warner was woeful. Steve Smith really didn't look convincing. Like, I know the commentators kept saying, oh, he looked like he was on today, but I feel like that's everyone just sort of anticipates Steve Smith to do something special every single time he goes and bats for Australia, especially outside of Australia now, because he's been that guy. He's been the best overseas batsman probably in the world over in this last year. I guess, yeah, Root and Virat go close. Virat's fallen off, all that stuff. Kane's never really made it quite click overseas. Obviously still exceptional, but compared to the others, probably not. But I'm just ranting for no good reason right now. Either way, I feel like his expectations were just sort of at high, but we were also at the same time assuming he was doing well, but he always just sort of looked like nicking off. And it just never really looked that comfortable. So I'm a little bit concerned about Steve Smith going into this Ashes, but one thing I've learned over the last week or so especially is that you never count against greatness. Just don't do it until you actually see them go right to the bottom and you see them stay there for a long time. just don't count against him. Now, Virat Kohli, I know it sounds like what I'm referring to there. You know, I'm not going to lie to you. I almost counted him out. Almost, but I was really, really happy to see him score 180 or whatever it was in that last test. And I'm sure, I think we all really were. It was really good to just see Virat do what he does best, and that is just scare the living daylights out of opposition bowlers. But anyway, not talking about that. We're talking about Australian openers. You know, the tangents we get onto this podcast are like nothing else, because I just sit down and I talk into a microphone that isn't even connected, right? That's the adjustments we've made. If you're watching on YouTube, boom, I'll talk right into this microphone right now. It's not connected, all right? But I just need something to hold. Either way, openers. Khawaja, obviously a lock. Head was very solid for what he was. Actually, no, he was just pretty solid full stop in that India series. But he's going to go back to number 5, which is where he's most comfortable. Or maybe even goes back to that. I don't think he can go back to number 6. Even though I would really like to see Cameron Green get more of an opportunity. And you know, he definitely proves that he's deserved that. I don't feel like he's quite ready for he is ready for the promotion, but I don't feel like you can just sort of swap it with Travis Head, given the form that he's in. So it will go Marner, Smith, Head, and Green at 6. Wicket keeping, that's for a different episode. Alex Carey was absolutely shocking with the bat, and I can excuse stupidity, but it's when you don't learn from it, right? And because we all have terrible days in cricket, cricket is a shocking sport, and you are going to stuff up. I can excuse that. But when you don't learn from it and you make the same mistake time and time again in the same series, that was really frustrating to watch. Did Todd Murphy end up making more runs throughout the series than Alex Carey? I think he honestly might have, even though he made like a duck every innings except for one innings. Either way, we'll say that for the next episode, because I like wicket keeping. You know, keeping myself. I could talk about wicket keeping for days, so we won't save it for this episode. Travis Head will go back to 5, so I don't feel like he's going to be that guy, but we're going to talk about him in depth a little bit later. So I've got a bunch of categories that we're going to be sorting into today. Pretty much every notable opener on the domestic circuit right now, I'm going to have a chat about and just discuss where I think whereabouts they generally sit in the test form. The only one excluded from this I'm not going to be talking about today is Joe Burns. I feel like his time is well and done. Here I am talking about him anyway, right? I feel like his time in Oz colours is in Oz Test whites the days are probably past him. He's been okay for Queensland, I guess. Hasn't been that good, hasn't been that bad. It's just sort of been there. So I just feel like he doesn't need any more slander. I feel like he doesn't need any more praise. He just needs to exist for a little bit, work out whatever it is he's doing. I don't even know how old he is. I feel like he's older than what he actually seems, or I don't know I don't know. I one of the few cricketers I genuinely couldn't tell you how old I think Joe Burns is. Maybe 32, maybe 31. I don't know. Research that at your own time. He's probably the only one that I'm not going to go super in depth and doesn't follow into any of these categories. So I'm going to start off with the front runners. Obviously, we're going to start right with the big fellas, and there's only a couple batsmen in each category. So we're going to go front runners, we're going to go county dependent, we're going to go rogue, outside chance, and batshit insane. There's pretty much every shield opener, as well as a one mystery batsman that I'll talk about right at the end, which I think is very, very intriguing. And it holds similarities to the Travis Head pick for opening that we had a couple of months ago and at this point last year. But we're starting off with the front runners. So the number one front runner in my mind is Matthew Renshaw. Now, Matt Renshaw, I was never sold on him coming back into the team, and you can listen to me talk about that more in the last episode of this podcast. I've never been completely sold on Matt Renshaw. Now, I really want to love him. I really want him to do well, but I have never really been convinced that he's ever made that true step into starter, or he's never quite harnessed that talent, or hasn't quite really got a consistent base for him to work off, which when you're an opener, when you're just any type of domestic cricketer, you want a consistent base. Renshaw has made a couple good scores, but this season he made 1 century. I feel like only in the last 2 or 3 years he's made 2 or 3 centuries, right? But obviously now this century was a double hundred, so you get a little bit more, you get a bit more leeway, right? But it was really only that innings this season, and he made one other 50, I think, before he got picked for the Oz Test squad. And that's all it took for the public to be like, where's Renshaw? Why isn't he playing? And I almost feel like the selectors actually, they played into the public for the first time. I don't think Matt Renshaw should have been in that team. I feel like in Oz A, yeah, sure, because I know Matt Renshaw is someone they invested in when he was really, really early, and then he ended up getting dropped from the Queensland team 3 years ago. I know I sound like a broken record. I said all this in the last episode, but to recall someone of his talent and his caliber, when it's all firing on 4 cylinders, right? When you do that, you're expecting someone, and especially in this scenario, when he was coming in to fill in the middle order and he was batting in, he came in for Travis Head in India, which no one agreed with pretty much. And he came in. Did he come in for Travis Head at Sydney as well? Who was injured? No, Cameron Green was injured. Either way, he batted in the middle order for both of them. Now, Renshaw batted in the middle order every season before this Sheffield Shield season and didn't get picked, right? And I thought that was very, very fair because he really wasn't that good. But this season, he opened and made 1 century as an opener, a double century at that, like, to be fair to him. And then all of a sudden he gets picked, but in the middle order. So I don't really think that they understand what his role is in the team. And in turn, like, they're just sort of picking him because his name is Matt Renshaw. Now, that's not to say that Renshaw isn't an international quality batsman, and I know I've just said that he's a front runner and the number one option in my mind, but I'm just here hanging shit on him pretty much. But I don't think I think that they're just sort of picking him because he's Matt Renshaw, and that in turn has left Renshaw a little bit confused about what his role actually is. He hasn't been able to work solidly into his own position, and that's really hard to get a really good momentum. It's hard to get any sort of stability, I suppose. And like I said before, when you're a Shield dominating batsman, supposedly that's what you can only really get picked for in this Australian team, is by being Shield dominant. You need to be more consistent. Pete Handscomb was really consistent for 3 years, and he absolutely dominated the last 2 seasons, especially. That is the blueprint. Renshaw did not follow that, but he got picked anyway. And whilst I completely support dropping Travis Head for that first India test, and I think they were very much justified in doing that, to do it for Matt Renshaw at number 5, I didn't see how that was much better, because Renshaw isn't really a spin specialist. He's not someone who was in excellent form, but you pick him there anyway because he's not Travis Head. And in that sort of 5-6 position, you're just trying to pick someone. It's a risky spot pretty much, right? It's supposed to be your weakest batsman. Albeit, like, Cam Green wasn't, I don't know, Cam Green wasn't playing, so it's a little bit iffy. Because I actually think that Renshaw was ahead of Pete Handscomb at that time, and Handscomb was the one that got picked. But the position that they were playing each other in, I feel like Head would have been at the 5, Handscomb at the 6, which doesn't make much sense to me. I would have put in Handscomb 5, and then Renshaw or Head is the one you got to pick from there. And at that sort of point, you're picking what's supposed to be your weakest batsman in that condition, or the aggressor, or the one that's going to start against when the bowlers are tired, or you're going to go against the spin. You might as well go for a high-risk strategy, because Renshaw's not going to be doing much. He's going to get you, 15, 20? He didn't even get to that for this series. I feel like you're not really losing much, so you might as well pick Travis Head anyway, and eventually that's what it came around to. But for opening, I've just hung so much shit on Matt Renshaw, but I'm still going to put him as my number 1 choice. I don't think, and I'll address this right now, this is the overarching theme for this episode and for Australian Opens, and why it's so interesting. It's because no one's really good, other than Khawaja, obviously. No one is really going to be making you that, like, a big score, or no one's really going to be making you and he can sort of consistent runs. You're either looking for... You can approach this from one of two ways when you're touring England, all right? And in the situation they're in right now. So Khawaja is your lock. He's going to do his thing, and we've seen how good he's been. There's no questions about that. He'll play the whole series, even if he doesn't make a 50, all right? And he deserves to. You can take this from one of two ways. One is you pick the most hyper-aggressive batsman, or you pick who's got the biggest ceiling. Because everyone's pretty much got a similar floor, all right? Which is like, get out for 5 runs, or get out really early and you're 1 down for 10. And then Marnus Labuschagne and Steve Smith have to come in at like 2 for 15 or something like that and save the series. Which is pretty much what happened last time we toured there. So you can look at it as going, alright, who's got the highest ceiling? Because if everyone's is likely to suck, we might as well pick someone who's got the potential to go huge. Or you can look at it from the option B, which is go for the player who you think's most likely to consistently get you 25 to 30, or just 20 to 30, right? And that's a low fucking bar, I get it. But in England, maybe that's all you need, because you just want to protect Steve Smith, you want to protect Marnus, you want to protect Green and Head as well at this point, right? Because they're all really, really high quality bats. You want to protect them from the swinging ball nice and early, especially, you want to protect them from Jimmy Anderson's pretty much what I'm saying, right? You want to protect them from the hardest conditions, and you want to get them in at around the midpoint of that first session, towards the end, whatever it... Well, ideally, you want to get them in the second session, right? So if you can just pick someone who's going to hold out for half a session, maybe a full session, get 20, get 30, that might be the ideal player. And in this instance, I think Matthew Renshaw is probably the best at that. They've been picking David Warner, because he's got this whole legacy, right? Like, he's David Warner, he's the best... One of the best openers ever in Australian conditions, maybe the best ever at home. Well, one of the best players ever, full stop, in Australian conditions. But, notice I said one of the best, okay? But overseas, everyone knows he's really, really struggled. But they keep picking him because he's got this home record, and you feel like he earns his spot there because he's just... he's got the legacy points. And like I said before, you don't count out a champion until they've absolutely sucked and they've shown it. Warner has shown it, alright, and this is why I think, so you can go with one of two ways. One is to get just the 20-30, as I said. I think Renshaw is the best. And then the other way is what the selectors have been thinking, is to go for the highest potential. And that, in this instance, is David Warner. David Warner's always been the highest potential opener that we've had, and he's always going to be, right? Even tomorrow, well, if we were to play a test match tomorrow in England, I wouldn't be picking him, but I would still be admitting that he's probably the most likely to make a triple ton, for instance, out of all the openers. I don't know how much merit that has. I've just sort of blurted that out, but that's sort of the two different philosophies. I think, given the quality of the rest of the batting lineup, you really only want 20 to 30. Well, yeah, that's all you really need. Obviously, a massive score is beautiful, but would I rather take a fairly assured 20 to 30 or maybe a 50? Like, that's really what Warner was in the last series, was he got 150 right in the middle and then sucked for them all. Obviously, I'm going to rather those consistent 20 to 30s. Now, whether Renshaw can do that is another question entirely, but I think out of all of our options, he's probably the most likely. So that is why I would pick Matthew Renshaw as the current frontrunner for the opening position alongside Usman Khawaja. Alright, next up, so David Warner is the next one up. I guess we might as well combine them into the same category. So these are the only two frontrunners, Matthew Renshaw and David Warner. I kind of just sort of talked about Warner in my Renshaw sort of rant, I guess, like, what else do you expect from this show? But I'll talk a little bit more about David Warner now. In that last episode, I said David Warner, without remembering the exact quotes, I said David Warner is pretty much, you can't really justify dropping him at any point at home. And I think he's absolutely earned the right to decide when he retires. Whether that be at home, whether that be away, he's completely got that right, because he's been such an amazing batsman, right? He's been such an amazing opener in Australian conditions. However, we are now at that point where, are you a hindrance to the team overseas? Probably yes. In fact, you were a hindrance to the team last home summer, other than that one absolutely incredible innings at Boxing Day. So other than that, didn't really justify being in the team at all. All right, I mean, and that's a big other than that, because that's his whole fucking job is to do things like that. Now, if you're gonna pick him and trust that he does something like that in England, then I get it. However, given everything you've seen, how can you possibly still have that faith that he's going to do it? How many tours has he been to England? 3 now? I think this is his 4th time going to England. Is it? Or is it his... No, it'll be his 3rd. Is it? Oh, I'm losing track. I think this is his 3rd time touring England. Is it? Oh my gosh, I feel like an idiot now. Either way, he's been there 3 or 4 times. Now, he hasn't shown us, not once, that he has the potential to go big. He's crossed 50 twice, I think, maybe 3 times in 15 tests. We'll say 15 at the minimum. It might be like 18-ish, perhaps. Now, there becomes a point where you go, okay, we've seen it in Australian conditions, but you have not done this. 15 tests, that is more than enough of a sample size, okay? Travis Head had enough of a sample size last year in the subcontinent to say, okay, you did nothing there. We can justify dropping you for that first test. And I will absolutely die on this hill. I think there was no real... He hadn't really shown anything to say that he was an improved starter against spin. The situation they put him into by opening him was the best possible one they possibly could have done. So... And you saw him when he got a recall, he batted at 5 and 6. He looked terrible. Honestly, he looked completely at sea. But then they moved him back up to the top of the order, gave him some more freedom, and that's when it all happened. Now, the only way David Warner could potentially succeed here may be at number 5. I don't support that because I don't know if he's ever even batted below number 4, because of that one time where India declared early so that he couldn't bat. I don't think he's ever batted below 4 in a first-class innings. I could be completely wrong there. But that it's too late in Warner's career to try that, and he just hasn't shown anything generally, because Travis Head had shown the bits and pieces against pace bowling. He'd shown the bits and pieces when that the same sort of mould for opening would work in spinning conditions. Warner, the conditions here aren't really going to change that much if he opens or bats at 5. So I personally think, even though I've put him in this front runner category just because he is David Warner at the end of the day, I personally don't think you can pick him. And I know first test, World Test Championship final, he will get picked. I don't think, I'm not going to, convince myself of something else other than what reality is. They will pick him for the World Test Championship final. I think it's at the Oval, right, against India. And the Oval, historically, quite a flat deck compared to other English tracks. And it's also what Australians kind of struggled at, just sort of low-key, which doesn't really make that much sense. But I kind of feel like it's a track that David Warner could succeed on. So in that instance, yeah, I don't mind picking Warner for the World Test Championship final. I also don't think the Indian pace bowlers have quite as much as your Jimmy Andersons, as your Ollie Robinsons, as your Stuart Broads to challenge him quite as much, even though they were freaking amazing. Jeez, very nice. Even though they were absolutely amazing with the new ball in India, and that's in conditions that really didn't offer that much for pace bowling. And they still travelled him, so maybe I'm talking out of my ass. But I think he probably has justified one test, and that is the Test Championship final. Now, if that doesn't come off, I would have no hesitation dropping him. Absolutely none. If he scores a score, right? If he makes a score, makes a 50 or an 80-ish or 100, I don't think it'll happen, but if it does, it could. If it does, it could. You know what I'm trying to say. If it does happen, then that makes the situation really, really tricky, because it's not, I don't think the overall or the conditions that you're going to be getting in the World Test Championship final are directly comparable to what you're going to get in the Ashes. So, yes, you're picking him because it's in England. Yes, he's made a century there, but it's a little bit different, I personally think. And I'm not really sold that I mean, you can't drop him if he makes a really good score, he has a good match. Even if he makes like 40 a couple times, or makes a 40 and a 20 in that WTC final, I don't think you can drop him going forward or into the Ashes. But that might get him like 2 tests. I think at Lords, if he hasn't made a score, he hasn't shown anything there, I don't think there's a way back. I think it's gone, right? Now, there's a couple different players that we're going to get into next, which is in the county-dependent category, and they're going to be just circling around. They're going to be over in England already, so it's a bit of an extended squad. And all these county-dependent players are relevant to this team, all right? So they're all players that could get picked if Warner just sucks, and they need to call in someone new. So that's what we're going to get into now, but I think Warner will probably start. He's not my personal preference, but I think he'll probably start. But he gets 2 tests, maybe 3 if you include the WTC final. I'm not completely sure how that goes, but I think Lords is the landmark test. That's where you need to make a decision, whether it be at the end of it or at the start of it. Going forward from there, if he hasn't made a score, he has to go, and that is my anticipation of what will happen. I don't think he will score any real runs at Edgbaston, but he could in the at the Oval. So that's my slight concern, is how that will affect the rest of the series, because it is different conditions. I don't really know though. I really don't know. And I know it's a lot of exposition to just sort of say not much, but that's sort of where I'm sitting on David Warner. But yeah, we'll get into the county-dependent category now. Alright, first one in county-dependent, we have got the current leading Sheffield Shield run scorer, and who will finish the season as the leading run scorer. It is Cameron Bancroft. He's got a county deal. I don't know if it's actually been announced yet, but he's got a county deal with Durham, I think. I think it's Durham. Or is that Todd Murphy? I can't remember. Either way, he's got a county deal. Now, last Ashes, he got picked off a county deal. Was it Nottinghamshire? Or was that what? I need to do my research a bit better. Either way, I know that Bancroft, Marcus Harris, and Sam Whiteman have all got county deals. Now, I've got reservations on all these 3, and you should probably too. Now, Cam Bancroft got picked last English Ashes because of county performances, and he sucked. To tell you the truth, he was not good. He looked at bay, he didn't look comfortable, and they replaced him after 2 tests for the left-handed, mind you, Marcus Harris, and he was not much better. But he got the rest of the series, because why would you recall someone who's already been dropped, right? And Bancroft's been pretty good in the Shield. He's been quite good. I still don't think he's been remarkable, and I don't think he's done enough to warrant English selection. Selection for the Test team in England. And I feel like if you're basing it off Sheffield Shield performances, like I said earlier, with your Peter Handscombs, with your Matt Renshaw, with different situations, of course, you need to be a consistent scorer for a few years. Bancroft almost got dropped at the start of last season. In fact, he might have already. He might have actually got dropped last season. I can't quite remember. But there was a lot of discussion around it from us Sheffield Shield people on Twitter, right? Which is pretty pathetic. I can't believe it. I just openly discussed the makings of Sheffield Shield selection, right? But either way, Cam Bancroft nearly got dropped start of last season. He's turned it around. He wasn't incredible last season, but he ended up being relatively okay from memory. This season, he has been great. However, in a comp like the Sheffield Shield, as I've said, you need to have sustained, consistent success. What you're looking for in an opener in England is sustained 20s or 30s, or someone you can rely on, right? Usman Khawaja, in my mind, is someone you can absolutely rely on, given his recent form and all the rest of it, right? He's got a beautiful, beautiful technique. He's scored runs against spin, against pace, all of that jazz. You should feel confident with him opening the batting. Averages, like an 80 or something like that opening the batting at the moment. Even though he's, he got dropped last time he went there, I would still have confidence in him. He's in far, far better form. Now, Cam Bancroft, what is in his favour is that he is a right-hander, and that typically is more suited to English conditions, especially when we're talking about our openers. However, that should only get you so much. So I've put him in the county-dependent category because if he absolutely dominates and has similar numbers to what he's had here in the Sheffield Shield, then I think you could justify a squad inclusion. Would I pick him first up? No. But again, it's all dependent on how this one goes. Now, I don't think he's done quite enough right now to be even considered if someone went down. I would still have a couple others ahead of him, like your Renshaws and whatnot. But I feel like he's definitely got the makings there. I think just a large part of Cam Bancroft's place in the Australian Test team just relies on feeling. Last time he got recalled, he was terrible. Actually, I'm pretty sure he did get dropped at the end of that domestic season, right? I think similar time around when Matt Renshaw got dropped, so definitely not dissimilar. But each time Cam Bancroft's come on the international scene, apart from really his first test, he's never really looked that good. And I feel like the biggest thing in that 19 Ashes was mentally he didn't look there. And that's a really tough thing to say, especially as an observer who doesn't know Cam Bancroft. Seems like a nice guy, right? He does all the meditation stuff for the team, so good on him. And it's impossible for me. This is all just speculation. This is probably totally wrong. Take it with a grain of salt. He didn't look mentally up to the task. And I definitely believe in changing that. I definitely believe in a person's mental strength being overcome or improving it, whatnot. But I think a lot of it, for me, just relies on feel. And I need to see Cam Bancroft absolutely dominate something for a consistent time before I say, okay, he's the guy. And really, what is Cam Bancroft going to provide? He's not going... I don't think you can possibly say that he's going to provide decent scores or like your milestone scores like your 50s, 100s. He's not going to do that in England, right? He, I think, falls into the 2030 category. That's what you're supposed to be looking for him. And there's just better options in that situation. So unless I can see it in a consistent basis in this county championship, I don't think he's really there yet. And it's a shame because I would like to see a bit of a redemption arc for him, and he has obviously overcome a lot of adversity. So it would be good to see him succeed. I'm not preying on the downfall of any of these guys at all. But that's just where I sit with Cam Bancroft. Next one, we've got Marcus Harris. I don't really have a lot to say on Marcus Harris. He just sort of is what he is, but you have to mention him because he's been the best domestic opener for Australia in, for the last 5 years, you would say. So he just deserves to be mentioned. I just don't have anything else to say on Marcus Harris. He's been tried, he's been tested. He had an exceptional breakout Shield season. He looked pretty good against India. Never actually made a score, which was a shame. But he looked like he was going to do things when he played against India in that 18 Bodh series. Didn't get picked ahead of Cam Bancroft because he was kind of pretty slow leading up to it, to be honest. Was shocking in the 19 Ashes. He's been recalled a couple times as a bit of a fill-in since then. And he just hasn't looked up. He had that 70-odd at the MCG. That's great. And that was awesome, right? But... And actually, was that against India? I think that was against India. Oh, no. No, it was last season, wasn't it? That was against... Who toured here last season? Oh, it was England. Of course it was, right? It was against England. Now, he's never shown me enough. And... he's not someone I think that you can now keep coming back to because he's always been... Because each time he comes back into the team, it's because of sheer weight of runs. And I think absolutely that constitutes worth picking. Because like I've said, I'm actually not going to say it again because I've sounded like a broken record, but your consistent run scoring gets you there. And Harris has done that. So... why am I now so against it? It sounds a bit hypocritical, and it probably is. Well, it's because once you get to the highest level, ultimately, that's what matters. Harris hasn't shown me he can do that yet. Now, it feels kind of hard because I feel like overall he's been kind of overhated. He hasn't really been that bad, and I think as a reserve, he's adequate. But as someone you want to pick as your first choice when you've got all these other choices around him, and well, we're presuming that everyone's going to be at full health as well. There's nothing else that he has. He hasn't got anything else over any of these guys. Similar thing with that last little bit with Sam Whiteman, who's the last county dependent player. He doesn't have anything extra to add. And while Sam Whiteman's been a very solid player over the last 3 Sheffield Shield seasons in particular, even got WA captaincy this year, so shout out to Sam Whiteman, former international player, of course, if you know, you know. But he doesn't have... I don't personally see anything that'll make him get to that next level, sort of like that Marcus Harris. Marcus Harris has a far superior domestic record to Sam Whiteman, and it feels a bit disrespectful to him to compare the two. So I won't actually. So Marcus Harris I have ahead of Sam Whiteman, and Whiteman's just been good. He's just been a good player for his state, and I feel like that's all Sam Whiteman really is. He hasn't had that big prolonged stretch of runs. He's had a couple big scores actually in all his fairness, and I don't really feel like I ever see him play that badly. So perhaps the mold is there, but I just don't think the quality's going to be there, which is a shame for Sam Whiteman. Now, if he absolutely tears up the county season, and I'm talking like average 70 plus, then he's justified it. But he's sort of just been in that average 40, be a good player sort of realm. I'll hit it here and there. I'll be slow if I need to. I'll be attacking if I need to. I'll lead the state to their second Shield title, most likely, right? And that's great. Like, Sam Whiteman's great for what he is, but he's not to the same level of even your Cam Bancrofts or your Marcus Harrises. So, your Marcus Harris, I suppose. So I feel like he would need to show even more than the other two, because really, what are you going to get out of Sam Whiteman? I don't know what you're looking for. Are you looking for that big score? Because yeah, sure, he can make big scores, but that's what you sort of have to show that in your Sheffield Shield numbers to justify selection. So I feel like, again, he's another one of those 20-30 players. Technical difficulties there, but yeah, Cam. Why do I keep confusing Cam Bancroft and Sam Whiteman today? Sam Whiteman needs to show heaps more in county cricket. Now, from memory, he was okay for Notts last season. I'm pretty sure he played for Notts, right? Or is this his first? No, I feel like he's definitely played for Notts before. He's either playing for them this year or last year's. You can tell I'm really well equipped on the county cricket side, right? Marcus Harris, whilst on paper has quite solid runs in county, from memory, he plays in quite a low quality. But he plays in the bottom division. He plays for a pretty low quality county side. He plays on pretty low quality decks. So there are asterisks onto that. So I feel like you also need to see a little bit more. What are you trying to get realistically from Sam Whiteman? Is it the big scores? I don't know. Is it the 20-30? Probably. Now, Marcus Harris, he could be the 20-30 player. He absolutely could. But I personally feel like Renshaw is definitely ahead of him. And I'll also need to see it in a far more consistent basis. Not just in county, but because he's had the opportunity internationally. And that seems really kind of rough to say that, I'll need to see it internationally, so that's why you're not going to get the opportunity internationally. Like, that doesn't really make sense. But he's had that opportunity now. You need to absolutely tear the house down in county cricket to justify it. As I said, adequate backup, but nothing more, I think, for Whiteman and Harris. Bancroft has the potential to be your starter, but I don't think I can realistically put him up there when he's just only had one good season. 1.5 maybe, right? So that's where I'm sitting with the county-dependent players. Alright, outside shot category. Now, let's get into this one. There's only 2 batsmen in this category. One of which is Travis Head, who we've talked about before. I don't believe that he will be opening for Australia come the Ashes because who's going to bat at number 5? Who? Pete Handscomb might be the first instinct because he was in that team for the India series and he was pretty good. Like, even though he averaged 29 for the series, he was our second best bat. Now, the only problem is, and it feels really harsh to Pete Handscomb because he's been really, really good in domestic cricket. He's made all the right moves. He's averaged 60 plus for the last 3 seasons, I think. Scored 280 in that time. He's done everything right, but he's again in that Marcus Harris category. You need to see it at international level, and he's done that against fairly low quality attacks. To be frank, he's done that against low quality attacks. Each time it's against a swinging ball, each time it's on decks that give a little bit of nip, he gets found out, and you saw that in that last test in India, and even though that deck was absolutely dead, the ball he got out to was a good ball, but he made it look like it was an exceptional ball. And it's just the way his technique is. And unfortunately, I just don't think Pete Handscomb's ever going to be that guy at number 5. I don't feel like he's ever going to be a guy you can rely on outside of subcontinent conditions. Keaton Jennings type beat. Honestly, subcontinent should be one of the first names picked. But anywhere else shouldn't be in the squad. That's my feelings towards it. So I don't feel like you can pick Pete Handscomb at 5 for the Ashes. He's shown so many times that against a swinging ball, he gets found out, and there's no harder conditions to bat in against swinging ball like there is in England, like there is against Jimmy Anderson, like there is against Ellie Robinson, like there is against Stuart Broad. You get the main point, right? So, what are you picking for? To play against Jack Leach? Good on you, man. I'm pretty sure every Aussie batsman can play against Jack Leach with all due respect to him. Alright. Jack Leach was second in the world for Test wickets last year, which is absolutely hilarious. So, he's improved, but he's no troubling out batsman, to be honest. So that's why I think Travis Head is only an outside chance for the opening spot, and he just sort of has to bat 5. I can't think of anyone else really who would be fitting at that 5 spot. Like, Aaron Hardy hasn't really made runs. Hilton Cartwright has, but I don't know how he would go in England, and hasn't really been just absolute dominance. There hasn't really been a dominant middle order batsman in this Shield season or over the last couple. It's been Pete Handscomb, and we've seen that just doesn't hold up. His technique just doesn't hold up at international level against swing balls. So, yeah, I don't know. Unless you were to put Renshaw at 5 and Head opening the batting, then maybe. But then why wouldn't you do Renshaw opening Head at 5? It's better. It's just better. Head's better at 5, so you want your best batsman to be there. The best version of your bat to be there. So I feel like he should be there, and I think our opening options are slightly better than those at 5. Maybe I can't really think about it too. Can't really process the other middle order options too much, but I just don't think so. Unless there's just a middle order batsman that goes berserk in between now and then, or this Will Sutherland just has an incredible county stint where he averages 80, which, to be fair, could happen. He's the type of player that would dominate the county cricket circuit. Otherwise, I just don't think that Head would open the batting. The other outside shot batsman is a really interesting player, and he's one who I really like watching. Someone I really like following in the Sheffield Shield, because he's just had a really interesting career path. And that's Caleb Jewell. Now, Caleb Jewell is reasonably young. He's pretty talented, I would say. I was going to say reasonably talented, but he's more than reasonably talented. He's pretty talented. And he's been pretty good over the last couple of seasons. Now, has he been exceptional? No. But has he been pretty good? Yes. Like I've said, and like the precedent I've set earlier in this podcast, just being pretty good for 1 or 2 seasons isn't enough in my mind. But Caleb Jewell fits into that the first category I said right at the start of the episode. He's not a 20-30 batsman. He's a guy you're going to pick because, sure, you might get a couple, 5s and 10s or a duck. But I feel a little bit more comfortable that Caleb Jewell could be the guy to go massive. Or he might get a 90 or something like that, which is massive for an opener by our standards, right? So that's why I think Caleb Jewell is there and thereabouts, and it's because he is such a talented batsman that if it were to all click, I personally wouldn't be surprised. Now, I don't feel like Caleb Jewell, his time is there yet. Like he's 25, which is actually that's how old I thought he was. Actually, I thought he was 24 to be fair. He's 25 now. He's still got room to improve, obviously, and I feel like he will improve. And will he play for Australia in the future? Yes. I think he might. I think he will, just because of where, Khawaja and Warner are at this stage of their careers. I feel like he will get a chance at some point. And he's definitely got room to improve. 25, definitely not your prime. It's like 28, 30. If you're Usman Khawaja, it's 34, right? So, I think Caleb Jewell will get his chance. I don't think he's just there yet. But if you're looking for one of those Category A openers, the ones that can go huge, I would honestly go as far to say he could be one of those guys. He could be your best option. I mean, David Warner is David Warner, and he's the bull. But I kind of think Caleb Jewell could be that sort of player. So if you're looking for that, I hadn't really thought about this until I just started talking about it now. But if you're looking for that category, I kind of don't mind him if he's a reserve. Now, you've got the Australia A series against New Zealand A. This New Zealand A team is pretty weak, so we better beat up on that. But if he dominates that, I would not be completely against him being a backup. I wouldn't. And I put him in the outside shot because if you ask the average person, they would probably barely even know who Caleb Jewell is. Well, he had a good Big Bash season, to be fair, so maybe not. But the average person would not consider him for the Ashes team. So that's why he's in the outside shot, and because he's been a bit inconsistent, but that's the type of player he is. And if you're picking David Warner, he's in that mode too. So if they're comfortable enough to pick David Warner, albeit it's not the same because David Warner's, he's one of the all-time greats at home, and Caleb Jewell has not done that yet. But if you're comfortable with picking that sort of mold, Caleb Jewell's an option, So he's the last one in that outside shot category. Alright, we're going into rogue territory now. Now, I don't... These two won't get picked, and they're not a chance to get picked. And it sucks, because they should be. They really should have a chance to get picked, and they should, in my mind, have made test squads before, if it had all gone right. But they're not going to get picked, and nor should they. But I put them in the rogue category just because I want to talk about them. It's Henry Hunt and Bryce Street. The two of them have sucked this year. There's no two ways about it. They have sucked. Bryce, well, actually, to be fair, I'm going to start off with Bryce Street here because it doesn't make any... His season has made no sense at all. Start of the season, they were picking Jack Clayton, who finished the season really well last year, to be completely fair. But Bryce Street is the top Queensland run scorer over the last 3 years, maybe even 4 years, I can't quite remember. But either way, he's been their best batsman, because the best consistent one, because you've had Khawaja and whatnot have been with the test squad. Even Joe Burns was 4 years ago. But he's been that staple. He's been their top run scorer. Jimmy Pearson had a purple patch. He's not their top run scorer. Bryce Street is. And he's made a century for Australia A. He's been that guy. He's clearly quite talented. He plays the swinging ball very well. If there's one thing you know about Bryce Street is that he will freaking stay there. He will hold his ground. He is not going to give you an inch. And I kind of like that for English conditions. Now, everything I'm about to say here is not suggesting that Bryce Street or Henry Hunt should be picked, because they shouldn't, because their situations have been so rogue this season, as we'll say it. Now, Bryce Street, even though he was the top Queensland run scorer over the last 3 years, he did not get picked to start this season. And he had amazing lead up in the Premier Cricket range, right? Going up to him. So, leading up to the start of the Shield season, he was making runs for fun. I'm pretty sure he made a double 100, right? Or he made twin tons or something like that. He was absolutely dominating. Even took a bag with his medium paces. I'm pretty sure he took like 8 for or 7 for 20 or something like that. I don't know why he didn't get picked. It doesn't make any sense, really. Jack Clayton, kind of, yeah, I suppose he deserved his place because he had a good start to his Shield career at the end of last year. But Bryce Street deserved it more. He also deserved it more than Joe Burns, for instance, who ended up opening alongside Matt. Honestly, Bryce Street deserved his position more than Matt Renshaw did, if we're being completely honest. But he just got absolutely kicked out of the team. Did not get a game, even though Jack Clayton sucked. Joe Burns was pretty bad. Oh, he might have made one score, actually. And who else is in that sort of top 5 area? I think, did Sam Churloff get picked over Bryce Street? There was some weird stuff happening going over in Queensland. Now, he didn't get picked until the resumption of the Shield season, the second half. By which point, he had no cricket. He had not played any sort of good quality cricket at all. I would presume his mind was all over the place because he's like, where do I sit? I feel like I have to do something really strong here to maintain a place. And he didn't. He was pretty average. He was pretty below average, honestly. God bless him. He scored an unbeaten 100 in the last innings of the season. So I'm happy that Bryce Street isn't completely gone. But in my mind, if they had have picked him at the start of the season, if he had have had that full season under his belt, he'd be making runs for fun in Premier grade. He would be in the Australia A team right now playing against New Zealand in next week or so, and he would probably be searching for a county deal because the English conditions, that is Bryce Street territory. You want someone who can just hold it out. Kawhi just going to score his runs. Marnus is going to score his runs. Smith's going to score his runs. Travis Head's going to score his runs. Everyone in the team is going to score their runs. Maybe all you need, and if all the rest of the opening options aren't going to score any runs, they're just going to get out cheaply. If there's one thing you know about Bryce Street, it is that he is not going to get out cheaply. He's going to hold his own, and he's not going to get out cheaply. All right? He'll bat. He doesn't care if he gets out for 2 of 80. He will do it. He will hold his ground. He'll bat through that first session to make the life of the middle order easier. I would have loved to have seen that, but it won't happen because the Queensland system just didn't work for him. And to be completely fair to them, he wasn't good when he came back. He had that just one good innings at the end. So that's just this Bryce Street situation. I just want to talk about it because it's just very strange. Presuming he gets picked again next season and it all goes back to normal, I would feel like he does get a gig in the Australian Test team or a Test team again at some point, and that's where he should be. The other one in the road category is Henry Hunt. Now, in an ideal world, I feel like Henry Hunt and Bryce Street are they match up pretty well against each other. With each other. I think they're a pretty good opening deal. Henry Hunt took the SA reins this season. It was a prime opportunity for him to really nail down to be that backup opener. I could have seen him on the plane to India if it had all gone well. He has not been good this season. He had a really good defiant innings at the start of this season, I'm pretty sure, right? Pretty sure it was this season. Where, Victoria just could not get him out. And it was 80 off, 200 or 300 or something like that, right? Super, super slow stuff. But really, really good. And since then, I don't think he's past 50. Has Henry Hunt only made 150 this season? If that's the case, that's really a shame. Because we saw how much potential he has. He's played for Australia A. He hasn't done that well for Australia A, to be fair. But in a struggling dead backside for the last 5 years or 4 years, however old Henry Hunt is, I think he's 24. He's been their glimmer of hope. And you definitely could have constituted picking him for Australia at any real point. He would have been outside, but he definitely would have constituted picking. But unfortunately, even in this season, when Warner's been bad, Renshaw hasn't really done anything super. Travis Head opened the batting where he's never done that before. He opened that in Test cricket. He opened that for the first time in domestic cricket. Henry Hunt's a decent player of spin, couldn't get it done. He's a good player of pace, couldn't get it done. So he really missed out on an opportunity this season. Am I backing him to come back? Of course. And he'll get every opportunity in the world because it's South Australia. They have no other openers, right? And it's probably just an untimely down season for him. But if him and Bryce Street had have done their normal proceedings and everything had been normal, either one of them could have easily been in the team. I think Henry Hunt probably would have been slightly ahead, even though Bryce Street has the Aussie century. I probably would have picked Henry Hunt ahead. I think he's probably a bit more of an international quality player, or just looks like he's got higher potential. But yeah, man, that's just what I wanted to say about those two. It's just really unfortunate where they are. I hope they have a big rebound season next season, and that one of them can make the position their own before Dave Warner retires, because when Dave Warner retires, Australia are a little bit screwed, and I think they might just have to use Renshaw or Harris as like a stopgap between then and there, and it's pretty concerning. But we'll see what happens, We'll see what happens. But yeah, Henry Hunt, Bryce Street, get it together, boys. Get it together. And finally, we've got the batshit insane category. Great. Now this is batshit insane, as the name suggests. And these are two players who I just, that's a batshit insane suggestions. I've got two players. Number one is Teague Wiley. Now, Teague Wiley averages, 25 in first class cricket, to be honest. This is his first real season. I know he started last season, but he only played 2 matches at the end. Scored a century at the start, almost scored a century at another point this year. Other than that, been pretty average. So I think he would average about 27-ish. Now, still a teenager, and to throw him into the deep end in England against Jimmy Anderson's pretty has it going. I really rate him against pace. I really do. I think he's definitely got it. Now, this isn't some sort of revolutionary thing to say, oh, Teague Wiley's talented, and he's the next man up, because we obviously know how good Teague Wiley is. Well, we don't know how good he's going to be, but we can all see how much potential there is, and going forward, how good he could be. So, to suggest this early, when he's got 1 first-class century, 1 first-class 50, I understand it's pretty batshit insane, isn't it? But what I would like to say is I want to go back to that category A. Out of every single batsman in Australia, every single opening batsman in Australia, I should say, I don't think you can confidently say that any of them have even the potential to score an 80. Alright? You can't confidently say that. And Teague can't say that about Teague either. But if I were to rate the most likely players to score an 80 in England in the Ashes, I would go, honestly, this is all behind Usman Khawaja, of course, I would honestly put, so it pretty much goes down to David Warner, it goes down to Matthew Renshaw, it goes down to Caleb Jewell, and it goes down to Teague Wiley. I would honestly consider Teague Wiley to almost be number 2 in that bunch. I really would. And without a doubt, he's the highest overall potential out of the bunch. So, if you're just almost sort of resigning yourself to that number 2 opening position to be either, a bottom-out player who's just it's not gonna provide that much, you might as well, one of the philosophies you could take is just go, you know what? We might as well go full balls to the walls, go full risk, and just pick the highest potential. In this case, it's Teague Wiley. Now, is that ridiculous? Is that unrealistic? Of course. Of course it is. But I just, batshit suggestion. That's what it is. He'd been picked for the Aussie New Zealand A Test series. First class series. He probably won't even play in it, to be honest. He's probably just in the squad to just to see what it's like. But if Bro dominates, I'm just saying. It could be closer than we think. That's what I'm saying. And if there's one thing that George Bailey has shown over the last couple of years is that he is not afraid. He wasn't afraid to pick Matt Kuhneman, who only really had a few good tests at a few good Shield matches at home, and that was enough. He wasn't afraid to recall Usman Khawaja, even though he only had one good season, but we knew how good Usman Khawaja could be, and we knew what we were seeing was right. He's not afraid to pick anyone like that. He's not afraid to open Travis Head. He's not afraid to drop Travis Head. And I think there's a possibility he might not be afraid to pick Teague Wiley. How awesome would that be? Part of this is just fantasy, right? Like, it would just be so awesome to see, like, he's 18. It'd be so awesome to just see an 18-year-old just rock up to the Ashes and just go, yeah, I'm him, you know? Now, let me say, I'm not a super Teague Wiley fan or Teague Wiley super fan. I think he'll be awesome, but I kind of find him a little bit boring, to be honest. To feel like just doesn't have just that sort of exciting style, but he's really, really solid, and I think he, in really challenging conditions, would stand up. I think he's got the highest potential out of that bunch. So if you just want to go super, super rogue, maybe. I'm not saying I would pick him. I wouldn't. But it's there. And that's my number one batshit insane suggestion. To lead into the second batshit insane suggestion. And that is... You guys aren't ready for it. It's Alex Carey. He's the mystery batsman who I hinted at some points in my Twitter accounts and whatnot. Alex Carey's the mystery opener. Similar vibe to Travis Head. Now, we know Alex Carey can play. We know he can. But does he do it? No. He just sort of decides sometimes that he will. Sometimes he decides he's shocking. Sometimes he decides he's good. Last summer, he decided he was good. Now, Alex Carey, to be completely fair, now I'm going to talk about his glove work first up, just because it's the less important one, and we'll get into the batting more, because that's what we're actually talking about. But as a keeper aficionado, if you will, I love watching keepers. I love just seeing and sort of just ranking about glove work, like ranking keepers' glove work, I should say. Alex Carey, I never really rated him as a proper gloveman. I thought he was about high mid tier of pure gloveman in Australia, but in India he was pretty good. He was pretty solid. I wouldn't say he was excellent, but he was pretty solid, and he's just sort of been pretty solid generally in his Test career so far. So I don't, even though Jimmy Peirson is by far and away a better keeper, like so much time, so much cleaner with the gloves, so much better technique. It's probably not quite worth dropping him over. Not quite. But you know, Jimmy Peirson is that guy. The problem arises, however, and I touched on this earlier, Alex Carey was shocking against India. He was terrible. Out of all of our players, he was easily the most disappointing. Well, Steve Smith was the most disappointing, but Alex Carey was the worst. And I don't really like being that harsh on players, because I really... obviously, literally a month before that, Alex Carey was one of our best batsmen for the summer. Okay, so we all know he's got that in him. But down at number 7, he's maybe not quite being used to his full capabilities, and he definitely wasn't in India. And if you open him, I think he's definitely better settling against the pace, or he's better perhaps settling... Honestly, the ideal position for him, I think, could be at like number 4 or 5. When the deck's it's sort of playing itself in a little bit, you might get some spin against... Alex Carey's good against non-turning spin, or minimal spin. Not against India spin, not against Jaddu, alright? He gets cleaned up. But if he's opening, I feel like he's definitely got the abilities to put on the counter-attack, as similar sort of beat to what we saw in Travis Head against India. He can play his shots early, and that gets him more comfortable, because he has a more defined role in that case. And that means it gets him more comfortable that when the pitch does harden in and he's got more tired bowlers, he feasts on that. Like, he's really good against low-quality bowling. As is Travis Head, to be fair. Now, in that instance, I would say Alex Carey would open alongside Usman Khawaja, and then Jimmy Peirson would be at 7. Josh Inglis is cool. I like Josh Inglis. He's not done a lot wrong. He's a really good gloveman, and he's made runs. But I'd like Jimmy Peirson more, so unlucky. No, I just think Pearson's in better first class form. He's had more first class experience lately. People think Jimmy Pearson's like 33. He's like 28 or 29, right? He's younger than Alex Carey. Alex Carey's like 31, so we're not even picking him for the future. We're picking him because he's meant to be the best right now. He's not the best batsman out of keepers right now. That's Josh Inglis, and he's not the best gloveman out of keepers right now. That is Jimmy Pearson, and Josh Inglis is also better than him. So I don't really understand why Alex Carey ever got picked first off. I was always pretty vocal that I believed that Jimmy Pearson was better. And, Jimmy and Josh Inglis I've always been a fan of. That he could play at test level. So, yeah, that's just where I'm at with Alex Carey. If you were to open him, he's definitely got a higher potential than the rest of them, right? He's definitely got a higher potential than Renshaw. Probably got a higher potential than Caleb Jewell. I would say higher potential than Teague Wiley. David Warner, maybe not, but given what we've seen about David Warner in the past with England, that's why I'm sort of like just so anti his place in that situation right now. So I feel like you could definitely justify that. And you want to maximize that. You want to get him into a comfortable position. So not only do you get a better gloveman at 7, it means you can pick a better one at that. It means you can have a little bit more attack at the top, because I think Alex Carey, if he's tasked with the idea of opening, he doesn't usually get out cheaply to pace. Usually. I know all his dismissals in against India were cheaply, but they were to spin. And he was just not in a good mindset that series. Now, if that continues, he should be dropped, because, like I said, it's one thing to make a mistake, but he made the same mistake 6 times in a row. That is inexcusable. You need to learn. You've got coaching around you. You've got other players around you. You've got notes around you. You've got footage around that. How can you possibly do that so many times in a row? I don't understand it. So I was really unimpressed with Carey's ability to take on new things and to learn, because that's what the subcontinent is. You have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to learn. And he didn't. That's really not strong. But if he's tasked with starting against pace, I feel like generally speaking he's pretty good in that department. So maybe that's the go. And maybe that's the way you can start it with. Because on instinct, you would say Alex Carey cannot possibly be in our best 6 batsmen, best pure batsman in Australia. But is he in the best 2 openers in Australia? Maybe. I'll just sort of let that sit. Again, I don't even know if I would pick Alex Carey for that. But, if he's even in my best 11. But I think it's something that you could consider. And if nothing's working, which I think is very, very possible in this Ashes series, where Warner's getting out cheaply, they put in Renshaw, he doesn't do any well, and they're like, what do we do now? Bancroft, or maybe they play Bancroft, he doesn't do well. Maybe they try Sam Whiteman, but maybe they just don't want to make additions to the squad. They might go, Alex, want to do your thing? Because Josh Inglis will probably be in the squad, right? I don't know. It's there. Think about it. That's what I'm saying. So to finish, I'll just summarize with a nice little power rankings, if you will. So I'm starting with Matt Renshaw at number 1. He is my personal first choice. Number 2 is Caleb Jewell. Find me, I don't care. I've talked myself into it. Caleb Jewell's that guy. He's that guy. He makes runs and he goes big, and I really like that. It sort of fills the Warner hole. Got a higher ceiling as well. Number 3 is, I think it's David Warner. I think, just maybe. I don't want him to be picked. I'm not one of those David Warner haters. I'm really not. And I'll be rooting for him if he does get in the starting 11. But when we go through these experiments rather, and we test them again and again, the David Warner overseas, well, it's not really an experiment, just situation, it doesn't work. So, I'm putting Cam Bancroft ahead of him as well. Bancroft, Warner, Harris, I think, maybe. Teague Wiley, why not? I've forgotten the rest of them. Sam Whiteman, Alex Carey. I don't know, I'm just talking out of my arse now. I don't know, but I don't know, maybe I'll make an official list and post it somewhere. But either way, that's what we're looking at right now. Those are my general options. I think, yeah, I'll stick with that top three. Renshaw, Caleb Jewell, Cam Bancroft. Those are my top three options. Hope they do what I said to do in this episode, and they take it as it comes. They don't care what I have to say, but hopefully they all improve. Thank you all so much for listening and or watching. Yeah, it's spontaneous podcast. I'll upload whenever the hell I feel like it. All right. Next up, we're going to be talking about Alex Carey, wicket keeping, all that stuff. It'll be shorter, maybe it just delves into something else. Maybe we start talking about I don't know what else. Women's Premier League, dude. Women's Premier League is so good. I love it. Absolutely love it. It is so. It's like number one, absolutely unreal that so many women are getting their lives changed by playing sport. Number two, the quality is just awesome. The bowling's at times kind of does drag it down, but it's just so fun to watch, dude. I'm so happy that it's been such a success, and if every country was just as enthusiastic and was as real committed to new pushes as India is, cricket would be the number one sport in the world. So excited towards that. Wesley Mataveri took a hat trick last night, made 43 not outs. That's good. That's good vibes. Otherwise, not much cricket happening on right now. But I'll talk to you when I have something interesting to say. Play it through.